Welcome to the Intrazone, a show about the Microsoft 365 intelligent intranet. I'm Mark Cashman, running at Han Solo for you this week. Very, very excited to have you here today. On today's episode, we chat with Andy Huneycutt from Upskill Tech about his use and best practices across two big areas, AI and automation, namely his use and experiences with Power Automate and Copilot, including his tinkerings with generative AI as he's working on a children's book full of AI-generated story and characters. As a father of two boys, he has great reason to tinker and create, especially when hearing that age-old ask from his little people, "Please, Dad, tell us one more story, please." So I'm very excited to have you hear about that. I will also have some of those stories and images of what he will let me see before he publishes anything in the show notes and on the corresponding blog. I grabbed time with Andy on the 2nd of November while we were both at the 365 EduCon in Chicago to see what he was up to and ask him a few questions that I thought everybody would benefit from hearing his answers, especially when it comes to the practical nature of what you can do and how you can do it in the context of work. That is, automating your processes and making things in your life a lot easier, and of course leveraging and thinking about how to leverage some of the new technology that's coming out around AI. Within Microsoft, a lot of that is coming at you as Copilot. Copilot everywhere. You'll hear a lot from Andy. Just know a little bit of his background. He's an enterprise collaboration specialist. He's been doing it for 12 plus years, designing and implementing technical training, coaching people, and consulting on services and apps across Microsoft 365. And he is one of our MVPs since 2017. So he's a really good brain to listen to. And I think he has always a compelling way and a way to easily consume what it is that he's sharing. And as part of the Microsoft community, a tip of the hat to Andy because he also helps organize, plan, and run the Charlotte SharePoint and Office 365 Saturdays in whatever name iteration since 2015 up until the present, which means he's been doing that, supporting his community for nearly 9 years. So before we jump into the chat with Andy, as kind of a date and time check, Microsoft Ignite is now kicked off and there is a flood of AI and Copilot news among us. There's Copilot Lab news, Copilot Studio for developers, the new Copilot dashboard powered by Microsoft Viva. There are special chips in the data center to improve AI computation. Hello, Maya. There's new data from the Work Trend Index with insights how 70% of Copilot users say they're more productive and 68% are saying that there's an improved quality to their work, with people saying it's helped them 29% faster in a series of tasks for searching, writing, and summarizing, and getting caught up on those missed meetings is now nearly 4 times faster with Copilot. And on and on and on. There's a load of AI news and views that are now public, including the new name for the experience in Microsoft 365, now called Copilot in Microsoft 365. I hope that one sticks. Last little bit was a phrase and a sentence that Satya Nadella, our CTO, shared during his Ignite keynote. He said, quote, "Copilot will be the new UI to help you gain access to the world's knowledge and your organization's knowledge." I hope that is true here. I think you will see it will benefit you. Give it a try, at least give it a review so that you can see the possibilities. I'm going to link to a lot of that, and I'll go in a lot more depth across not just Copilot and AI, but a lot of the Ignite disclosures, just to give a summary in the upcoming Intrazone Roadmap Pit Stop, November 2023 edition, just around the corner. So it is apt that we chat with Andy about automation and AI. Very topical. And to get his view on it all, I think it is now time to hear our interview with Andy Huneycutt. We are in the keynote space, but it's just Andy and I. It looks like we're about to give a keynote to nobody, but it's a nice quiet space here at 365 EduCon, and I know you've been busy. But if you can just give a little quick 101 of who Andy is, and then we'll get into what you've been doing at the show.
Absolutely. So first, I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me. My name is Andy Huneycutt. I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina. I am an enterprise collaboration specialist, which is a fancy way of saying that I'm a Microsoft 365 user adoption and training specialist for collaborative services. I've been here all week. It's been a great conference. I've been speaking on Microsoft Copilot. I've been talking about Microsoft 365 Power Users, Power Automate, a little bit of OneDrive sprinkled in between. And when I'm not in sessions, I'm attending sessions because I'm trying to learn as much as I can with all this amazing content that we have here.
So no slouch to sharing information and probably getting a lot of feedback. The first thing that sort of, when you're describing delivering a workshop or delivering a presentation with demos, and of course people are going to ask questions. Of those two that you mentioned, Copilot, Power Automate, any findings of what's landing, what people are having questions about?
So there's a lot of enthusiasm around Copilot, but there's also a lot of skepticism around Copilot. This is a new technology. It's definitely changing the way that we work. And it just went GA, so not a lot of people have had a chance to get hands-on with it or to see some actual demos with it and to really learn the ins and outs of it. But the overall response has been really positive. I had a good number of people in the workshop on Monday, had even more in the breakout session on Wednesday, which is really exciting. It's almost standing room only. I was pretty happy about that. Yeah, even had some of our colleagues sit in on the front row and they didn't heckle me too much, so that was fun. But a lot of enthusiasm around that. And then I've been doing Power Automate here at 365 EduCon for a number of years, and that tends to be a really good audience. The numbers are always good there. A lot of people really eager to learn how they can use automation for not only their team and day-to-day business activities, but how they can use it for things like personal productivity. And I love hearing those stories and trying to figure out how processes work and how we can plug in some of the Microsoft apps and services and maybe, scale ourselves a little bit more, get a little bit more done with a little bit less effort. So I find that to be really fascinating. And I get to learn a lot from the attendees around that.
If you compare something like 365 EduCon, where it's a little bit more of a generalist type approach, there's a broader agenda, there's lots of different sessions, and the whole product portfolio is pretty well represented. And something like the Power Platform Conference, whether you've attended or not, it's a lot more specialized to, of course, the Power Platform. But for this show and the sessions that you ran, both the workshop and breakout, did you get a sense that people were still in an early learning curve, especially with something like Power Automate? Copilot is everybody's in the early phase, so that's easy. But with something like Power Automate, I'm curious for people and maybe the sessions that you're delivering, are they oriented around somebody who is wanting to take it on as a new skill, or they've started already on the journey and they're wanting to refine and learn more?
It's honestly a little bit of both. I see a lot of the same faces every single year. They want to come back, learn something a little bit different because the platform continues to evolve, new features, new triggers to launch workflows, new actions. The editor is updating here recently. So they just want to kind of understand that. So it's a little bit of both. We have some people that are new to it. They want to understand the capabilities and try to figure out if they're going to be able to take it back to their organization and what the ROI might be on that. And then we got some others that are there because they want to fine tune what they learned previously. They want to fill in some more gaps. They took the lessons from last time. They feel like they've mastered those, and now they want to go back and add to that. They want to continue to build that skill set. So it's a good dynamic because when questions are asked, you can see there's other people in the room that were there, and I encourage them speak up if you have something to contribute. But you also add to the community. You can go and network and say, hey, this person's been where you are. You two should have a conversation, and that makes a good lunch table topic. And you can also start networking and continue to build a community. And coming from the SharePoint community, sharing is caring, creating those networks. That's really cool. And what I really like, especially around the Power Platform stuff, is afterward, it seems like there's always a number of people that want to come to the front and not only have a conversation about a specific topic, but just a conversation around it as a whole. And then people really start sharing because now you're not in the large session and, you've got like maybe 10 or 15 people sitting there and the conversation just kind of grows. And so I really like seeing that, but I learn a lot by the interaction of the questions that are coming through and those conversations that happen after the fact.
When I started as a product manager, there was somebody who was my peer who had been doing it for a couple of years, and I was pretty new. And even sometimes still, I feel new. It's been more than a decade. But the early learning was when you're giving an event, it's okay if somebody asks you a tough question. But usually if somebody's asking a question, other people have that same question. That's sort of the motto from school, no question is a bad one because somebody else probably has the same one. But the other thing was just that little trick of take that question and think about it as an FAQ you need to answer to publish somewhere else. So in-person event, it's, you can't get to the same value of being able to ask somebody who has the answer and have a dialogue with them, not just get the answer. But then the trick of how do I replicate that so I can scale so that fewer people are confused? And maybe it becomes a blog post. Or in your world, you do a lot of video work. And sometimes mining for what are people getting stuck on is the trick of not only what is my next video, but what is the next video that's going to have value. So there was that little, okay, don't just answer the question, but answer it in a way that you can make it something that becomes a part of what other people can find.
Exactly. And you're actually hitting the nail on the head for an old trainer trick that I picked up years ago in a previous role. We had it's called the 10 steps of training. And one of the steps was to anticipate questions and answers. And so once you get that question once or twice, you can adjust your content for it and you can anticipate when that's going to pop up and then you can go back and answer it. But you can also turn it into a blog post or you can turn it into a short video and then you get something that a lot of people can take away because they probably have that similar question.
Yeah, one last little thing on that. Scott Hanselman gave a talk about basically saving your time and time is not infinite. And he had a great section that was, we have a limited number of keystrokes left. So if somebody asks you a question and you write them a couple paragraphs, you don't want to get that same question and have to write the same paragraphs. You want to point them to a link, shorten the span of how many times you type on the keyboard because you have limited keystrokes.
So we've actually taken that to heart. My team, that is a mandate. That is conserve your keystrokes. That comes from the director down and the whole team abides by it. So if somebody tries to contact us directly and they have a question about this, we gently push them to our Viva Engage communities to ask the question there, search for it to see if somebody else had it. And then we can point them to a resource that we've already created to be able to answer that. Because we have a small team supporting a really large user base. And it's things like that allow us to scale and work in an enterprise environment.
Very important. So I wanted to maybe pick a little bit more into Power Automate. I'll admit it's something I'm not as fluent on. So I'd love to hear your take on it. But if we took it from the lens of an attendee to kind of frame out what it is I'm wanting to ask you, is if somebody walks in and the first 5 minutes of your talk maybe is describing the state of Power Automate these days, the kind of what it is, what it can do for you, and how it fits into the flow of work. The one little caveat to the framing of the question is from how you describe the value of automation, especially to those people who are very new to Power Automate, what the tool can do for me to save me time down the road and maybe even more programmatically take the same approach every time where repeated processes are a lot easier. That may or may not be the first 5 minutes of your talk, but I'd be curious on, how you might frame that.
I do address that early on in the talk. So I come from the SharePoint designer workflow world and naturally transition.
We don't say that on this podcast anymore.
But that's where we came from. With that in mind, when we're introducing Power Automate, it's a workflow engine. It allows you to have an event that starts this automated process and you have things that happen along the way and then you're guiding to an outcome. But some of the reasons that we do this is to save time and effort, but it's also to be consistent so that you can have a consistent process and that leads to known outcomes. Every now and then the outcome changes, but for the most part, it's a consistent outcome. And then we also do workflow because it allows us to be able to have insights as to how the process is functioning. We can have insights on the number of times it's occurring within a time period. We can measure ROI on that. We can see how long it takes a process to happen and if there's any way that we can shorten that and maybe be a little bit more efficient. So we can do some metrics and insight on that. But then it also gives us the ability to have traceability. What started this? What happened along the way? What's the outcome? So we can identify bottlenecks in the process. But it all comes back to process. You can't just throw a workflow at something and expect it to auto-magically make things better. You have to identify the process and the people involved in it. So we talk about that early on to kind of set the stage. And even though we're doing workflow and automation, one of the things that I emphasize is documentation. Document the process, identify the players that are involved and the desired outcome. But as you're building your flow in Power Automate, you also want to document it, because you're going to have to go back and maybe tweak it down the road, or somebody else is going to take over. And the documentation just helps pass it forward to the next person that's actually going to be running that.
You mean flow it forward?
Exactly.
At the conference, I know it's a one to a few, or one to many in terms of, it sounds like you had a standing room only, which is great to hear. There's another part of your world where when you're not at an event, you do some great webinars with your friend John, and maybe not always John, but I think you're your own co-pilots and you do a great job. I've been on a number of them. But to switch the topic just a little bit to hear a little bit about how you communicate throughout the year. And specifically, I know you just did a nice deep dive on Copilot, which sounds like you're talking about here. But I wanted to get a sense of, so people know when they join an Andy Huneycutt with John Moore webinar, what to expect. And then off of that, maybe we can get into what have you recently shared about Copilot that you're excited about.
I'm the one half of 365 Deep Dive, which is a monthly live stream on YouTube with my friend John Moore. We've been doing this for a few years now. We actually met during the pandemic virtually, and he had done some deep dives previously. And I think Microsoft Team webinars were getting ready to come out. And I was like, hey, do you want to do a deep dive on webinars? And he's like, that sounds cool. And so we did one. And then I followed up and was like, do you want to do a deep dive on this? And it turned into this whole YouTube show, 365 Deep Dive. So we take a couple hours and we pick a topic and we do a live stream and we just dive into it. We have a loose agenda, what we want to talk about. And then we just kind of push the buttons and turn the knobs and switches and just explore, but we do it in front of a live audience. So we take live Q&A and somebody asks a question, we discover something new. But here recently, we did a beginner's guide to Microsoft Copilot. This was right before GA, so it's what was known out in the world about Copilot, but we wanted to approach it from an end user's perspective. We've actually did a show previously. Jeremy Chapman from Microsoft Mechanics was on the show, and we talked about the back end and how Copilot worked and data privacy and security and preparing your organization from it. But for the beginner's guide to Copilot, we wanted to give a perspective from the end user. What can an end user expect to be able to do with Copilot on day one after they get access to it through the early access program or general availability? So we stepped through each of the apps and services, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook. We mentioned OneNote, Loop, and Whiteboard, and then we spent some time on Microsoft Teams and M365 Chat. And we wanted to show what you can do with it, but also to kind of help users to set their expectations. It's really, really powerful, but there's some guardrails in place, and I think they're necessary, especially in the Microsoft apps and services. So we want to just kind of emphasize, you can do this and you can kind of go up to this level with it, but this is like where you're going to hit the barrier. And we also wanted to emphasize that this is a brand new technology, and it's just now rolling out and getting in people's hands. And this is the least intelligent that it's ever going to be. It's going to grow. It's going to get more powerful over time. And what you can do with it right now is way more powerful than you probably ever imagined. But temper your expectations a little bit, like once you start working with it, because you can do some really amazing stuff. And that's what that show was about. So we're actually going to revisit that, and we're going to do hands-on with Copilot post-GA, and we're actually going to do demos, and we're going to walk through and show some of the different things and the learnings that we've had with it and share that so that end users can really understand what it's capable of.
This will be live Copilot?
This will be live.
Against whose tenant?
TBD.
John, let's sign into your tenant and we'll just show all of your stuff.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be John's tenant.
No, I know it'll be but interesting the approach that you took sort of before things were even easy to access for you to demo, and obviously for the code to be finished, and even with GA there's still a lot more to come.
Well, there's a lot of content out there. It's just putting it all together, and that's what we wanted to provide back to the community. We went and found the 55 blog posts and all the different support.microsoft articles and all the different videos that had been released. And we just put it together in like one place and then broke it up into category, app, and stepped through it. And so we wanted to provide that because it was hard for us to find that, and we knew other people were going to be struggling for that. So we thought that'd be something good to give back to the community.
To step on the landmine just a little bit, now we've got some concepts and whatnot in context here at the show, and of course the context of your webinar. So you're hearing a lot of what people are thinking about these things. Mm-hmm. Maybe one or two things about each, starting with Power Automate. What are the most common pro or con feedback that you're hearing that is consistent or important?
So on the Power Automate side, it's it's the subtext of the conversation. It goes back to what I said earlier. A lot of people get into Power Automate because they want to automate something and be more efficient, but they don't understand how it fits into their process. They haven't done that work yet. So that's kind of the underlying subtext for a lot of the questions that we get. They wanted to do this thing, they just don't know how it's going to fit into what they're trying to do. They haven't seen that application. So like when I do a demo, I try to do something, here's real life application. I like to do coffee shop based demos. I just think those are kind of resonate, but also like I'll show some here's one that I do for work that helps me to publish webinars internally for training. And it's all based off of a Microsoft list. And from this one list, I can set the dates and I can pull in the titles and the descriptions, and I can publish that using this workflow via email, via Microsoft Teams, to Viva Engage communities, and also to our corporate intranet. And this saves me hours of communications every single month whenever I run it. And that one really resonates. But you're trying to connect people to a process, and that's the barrier to kind of get them over.
Is this solution, do you call it Viva Andyify? Because it sounds like a little similar product we've got coming up here, Viva Amplify. But I get the scenario, not especially when it's a little something different with what the content is, like a video.
I do like that phrase, Viva Andyify. I might have to take that one back and joke with my team on that one. But this is kind of our version of it. It's something that my team's kind of built, and it really does save us a whole lot of time and effort. To kind of go take that question and go to the other side of it, the Copilot, there's excitement around it, but there's also people are trying to understand how it's going to impact them in the workforce. There's the fear that, this might replace jobs. And the thing that I think Microsoft has done a really good job on is the naming of it. It's Copilot. It's there to assist you. It's not there, I don't think, to replace you. It can amplify your capabilities as a content creator. It can amplify your capabilities as an information worker. And when you really learn how to use it, you can kind of scale yourself a little bit. I think you can do a little bit more with a little bit less, but you have to take the time to understand what it's capable of and then how to work within those boundaries.
I've heard it as well, and the assumption is, where you have not just talking points, but just sort of reality of, you govern your content and everything will adhere to that. But that notion of, we heard it with the Microsoft Graph, delve on top of it, the same concerns around overexposure, oversharing. Mostly you got to just get to the point where you understand how the technology works, and then of course the benefits, that how you can then leverage it. But understanding how it works, which I think the Copilot team is doing a really nice job on, to give both you and I the tools to be able to represent, and whether that's videos or slides or, lots of new documentation. But there's also just all the public facing, training people on how to use it, and real clarity on what we've phrased responsible AI, which I think is more an industry term, that, you fall on that as a data source, and then you hear, I think people see you and hear you as a trusted person who not only is trying it for themselves, but sort of has been through it and is a Microsoft MVP, willing to, represent and take the tough questions or take the time to get people from, a little bit of a misconception, misperception, or just a concern to maybe, a stable state of, okay, it does sound like, they're taking the right approach. Part of what I've always liked joining your webinars or anytime, just hearing you, is you have a tinkering mentality. which, I think is a compliment. I love gadgets and I love, kind of trying to figure out things, but I've never tried to qualify myself as a deep IT or a consultant or anybody that really will take it to that level. And the two areas I kind of wanted to kind of stay with Copilot, but it's almost based on something that you and I have talked about. You've actually been using generative AI to write a children's book. Whether you intend to write a children's book or not, you have young kids and it's for them, at least initially. But do you mind just kind of walking through what you did and, the kind of the learning out of it where you almost are getting more comfortable with the how it works because you're actually using it in a fun way?
Yeah, so my journey started, like many people, with ChatGPT as soon as I could get access to it way back in early 2023. And I found that I was spending more of my free time after the kids had gone to bed kind of exploring it. And then I got the idea one day. I was like, I had just read books with the kids. Loved doing that. And I was like, it'd be really cool to write a book for my kids and just create some story around it. So I come up with an idea and I explored ChatGPT enough to know that it's conversational. It's not just like ask it something and it'll do it and create the world's greatest prompt and you're going to get this thing. For me, I learned early on the value of it is to have a conversation and a back and forth. And through that back and forth, you can kind of direct it to give you what you want. And so I got to the point where I was like, okay, I have an idea for a children's book. And what I'd like to do is kind of build an outline for a potential story. And I came up with the theme that I wanted. The theme was around the pirates who love tacos. And I knew that a couple of the stories were going to be like the journey for the golden tortilla. And so I had an idea of what it needed to be. And based off of previous children's books, I kind of had an idea of like how the story, need to have a little bit of a conflict and then a resolution and a happy ending. But I also knew the things that I liked in the story, things like alliteration, onomatopoeia, repetition. Kids really like that. And so I was able to talk to ChatGPT about how to add some of that to the story. And through the outline, you have the back and forth. And then eventually you start creating like a dialogue between characters. And then you're able to move from like one scene to the next and move the story along. So I did a lot of that. On the other end of that, I was like, this is really cool, but this is words on a page. I need to be able to visualize this. And so at the time, John introduced me to Midjourney. And Midjourney allows you to do generative AI with images. You just prompt against it. And so I started learning Midjourney. And again, I found ChatGPT was actually really good for that because I could have a conversation with it. I could tell it, okay, these are the parameters that Midjourney uses to generate an image. With that information, let's have kind of an interview, ask me some questions about what I want to generate, and then help me create a prompt. And then I'll take that into Midjourney and then I'll tweak it and I'll start creating characters. I had to have another conversation with ChatGPT to start creating characters. I knew I wanted to have a set of pirates that were, happy and, the heroes of the story, but they have to have an antagonist. And so I had to create some of those. And so I was able to create some really interesting marine-based and tropical animal-based characters that had some human qualities to them. And then I was able to visualize all of that with Midjourney. And so I was able to learn how to create an initial character. And over the last few months, I've learned how to take one character and get it from a whole bunch of different perspectives in generative AI. So now I can, kind of get different poses and different looks. And then you learn how to start layering. I learned how to do that years ago in Photoshop, but you learn how to start layering with this stuff. And then all of a sudden you have all these tools at your fingertips that allows you to create something really, really cool. So I was able to create a couple of stories. I've read them with the kids. I haven't put it all together in a book format yet. We'll see, kind of how that happens. But it was teaching me how to talk to the machine. Yep. And I was able to take all of that and, now I can transition into Copilot or DALL-E 3 and work with all of those tools. But for me, it was just something fun to do at night, versus, scrolling on social media or trying to find the bottom of YouTube. I was going back and forth with these tools and just kind of learning the ins and outs and having a blast doing it along the way.
Besides what you showed me, if you allow me to, I'll put a couple of your generated pictures into the blog for this episode. And that'll be fun to share. But you're just hearing that a lot of people think, you put a prompt in and you get the story. And a lot of people don't actually like that first thing that it creates because it's a little bland, it's repetitive. no offense to ChatGPT or Copilot, but it isn't going to be the finished writer right off the bat. You do have to refine it. And even hearing you retell the story that I knew the parts and pieces from earlier, I'm hearing that you're using ChatGPT like a writing assistant or a creative director, that you can work with and say, I'm not an illustrator myself, but here's what I'd like. And then it goes off and does that. And that you then use the interchange between the two to kind of talk better to each other. But it's like a consultant. Obviously, I think we chose a good name, Copilot, meaning you're driving it. It's still your book. And you might want to put a co-authored by ChatGPT, as for fun, for credit, you don't have to. But the way that you're doing it, it isn't to just get a prompt and get the story and you're done. But it really is, you're doing research and you're working out the details and you're able to make progress and move forward. I'm going to bet that when you've read it to your kids, it was on a Tuesday. Taco Tuesday.
You may be correct in that.
So happy kids on Tuesday night with Dad's story. So thank you for sharing that. I also just learned some of the things about the tokens I didn't realize, because that was my question to you, was how do you maintain that the image is always going to look like the character that you want? That's hard to create a prompt every time that's going to do it. Then I realized that you can create a token for the image that keeps the look and feel of the character the same. And you're just telling it to throw its arms up, like it's happy, or it's, covering from the rain or something like that.
Yeah, so it depends on the generative AI service, whether it's like a Midjourney or a DALL-E 3, but it is possible to reference a specific token, a specific image, and then manipulate that image, change the perspective, change what it's looking at, arms up, squatting, things like that. And when you get one that you like, you can vary it and you can say, show this one, but from multiple angles. And you get the different perspectives, and then you can take it and you can input it on a scene.
The part of that I think that will carry over to, folks that are listening to this and thinking about Copilot and kind of getting beyond the what is it and what can I do with it, and then getting to play with it at least. I think there's two things. One of the things that you were mentioning, which is not our term by any stretch, but I think it's going to be a very important thing that just is learning new technology, prompt engineering. And I don't think it's always, like you said, writing the right prompt. It is knowing how to talk with and, have that conversation with a computer that is pretty smart, on the back end, but can also do a lot of things for you as long as you're doing it with it in the right way.
Exactly. And in my talk, I have a slide, and I've posted this on social media, but I talk about the things that you can do with these tools. And initially, like when you first get in it, you're like, I'm going to ask it to do something, create a document. You can ask it to search. You can ask it to research and start bringing material together. And it can become your research assistant, as you mentioned earlier. So you can go back and forth with it. That helps you with questions and answers. So you start on a topic and you're able to follow up with additional questions on that topic. You can ask it for an explanation. That helps you with your learning. But as part of that, sometimes like you start on one topic and then you figure out like, I need to cross-reference this with something else. And these tools are really good at that. They're really good at identifying connections that you might not have identified like right away, because they have a neural network on the back end. From there, you can have these tools do things like comparisons. Take this thing and compare it to that thing, and give me that as a table format, or help me to visualize it. One of the things that I really like doing with it is, as I'm talking about or learning about something with these tools, asking it for a specific example or giving it some dummy data to work with, and then using that as the sample example when it gives me an explanation. It's great at generating demo data. So one of the things as a presenter that's really hard is like coming up with all the demo data. So yesterday I sat in on your Copilot session and you said something and it gave me an idea. And so while I was in your session, I had Copilot up on Word and I asked it, I was like, can you create a conversation between two teammates? They're having an email conversation about a product launch that's getting ready to come up, but reference this document. And the document was about the Jolly Roger Java coffee shop that I was going to use in my demo. And they were releasing a few drinks for their fall campaign, and all the drinks at the Jolly Roger Java are pirate themed. And so it created a conversation of 6 back and forth between these two teammates. And the first time it did it in the voice of a pirate. And I was like, I like that, but that's not going to work for my demo. So can you make it?
That'll be great for your kids' book, though.
Exactly. But I was like, can you go back and make this more normal speech? And it did it. And then I was able to take that back and forth and send emails between, two test accounts that I have. And then I was able to demo Copilot in Outlook. So demo data is a great use of it. It also helps you to understand things like practical application. And if you're somebody who gets into SharePoint conditional formatting and views and columns, or if you're working with any kind of code, it's really good at things like code explanation, code notes. But the biggest thing that I found for all of this, especially Copilot, is it gets you over the blank page. It helps you to get something down on the page. And I feel, for me personally, once I get started, getting over that first hurdle, I'm off and running. And then I'm able to create something really cool. But with like Copilot, I'm able to have the back and forth. I'm able to have the explanation. I'm able to ask follow-up questions. I'm able to learn something along the way. And through that back and forth, I'm able to create something that might have taken a whole lot longer, a whole lot more effort. And I've been able to shorten that process significantly.
Well, I hope a lot of people will take to heart the effort, that just takes a little bit of playing with it, trying out a few things.
Approach it as a conversation.
Not a one and done prompt. A conversation is I think the big takeaway. And the last thing I want to ask you is, I have a really basic setup for you and I here. I have an iPad and a computer, and they're plugged in with some microphones, and I'm doing my best to, capture this audio But can you talk about what's in your kit?
So I have a classroom in a box kit. I got a mirrorless camera and some mics and things. I didn't bring that one with me. I tried to pack light for this event. So I've got a couple of wireless lavalier mics. Those plug in USB-C right into my laptop. Those mics also have some software that I'm using. It's called Rode Connect, and that's really good for recording audio. So I have that in the bag to keep it light. And then for camera this time, I have two cameras. I've got my iPhone 14 camera, because I often tell people the best camera you have is actually the one in your pocket. So I have that one with me. And then I also have a DJI action cam with me. It shoots some 4K, does some high frame rates. That one's more for fun, but I can use it as a webcam, which is pretty cool. So this one, basically the light backpack version of the kit versus what I normally have.
Very cool. Well, thank you for everything that you're doing here at the show, through your webinars. Of course, as an MVP, you're active in not only getting to be an MVP, but maintaining it in a way that it's a no-brainer that you'll get your next puck. Thank you for being on the IntraZone.
Thanks for having me, and I hope to see everybody on 365 Deep Dive, and maybe in the next one.
I can't wait to read and to share Andy's book. I do hope he publishes it. I know he's using it as a great scenario to learn and leverage and just tinker with generative AI across a lot of different AI offerings. So it's really cool to see what you can create, how you can create it, and then even learn how to better create, better prompts, better ways of knowing what the technology can do, so you can have it help you a lot more consistently, and hopefully save you a lot of time and generate some things that maybe you didn't even know were possible. With that, I want to take the art of what is possible with Andy's art to talk about the art of the possible of upcoming events. So Microsoft Ignite, which was November 14th through the 17th, is in the rearview mirror. There's still a ton of echo coming off of the event. There's a lot of new blogs, news, announcements. People will hopefully be summarizing what they liked, some of the things that they hoped they would have seen, and some of the things they're going to be planning for. But you can always go to the Microsoft Ignite site, watch everything on demand now, and especially catch up on all the news and really see it from a demo perspective. A lot of these are the first time we've shown a lot of things, including some of what Andy and I talked about and what I alluded to in the intro. Just around the corner is Collab Days Lisbon. This is November 25th in Lisbon, Portugal, at the University Institute of Lisbon. And of course, always a great Collabs Day lineup of speakers and content. If you're in the Lisbon area, you have a great regional city offering for you from Collab Days. Just after that, a couple days later, still on the EU side of things, is the European SharePoint Conference, or what is now referred to as ESPC. And Now it's ESPC 23. That's in Amsterdam, Netherlands. There's a lot coming from the community, MVPs. Microsoft will be there. We've got a nice opening keynote with Jeff Teeper and team. There's a number of different Microsoft keynotes from Caruana Gatimu and also from Donna Sarkar with a lot of depth from workshops, breakout sessions. There's a Microsoft AMA. We've got the whole shebang in Amsterdam, and I hope that you can join us at the European SharePoint Conference. At ESPC. New branding. December 5th through the 7th is Dev Intersection. If you're a dev and you're back in the US side of the house, then I encourage you to look at their website, check out what they're offering, and consider making a trip out to Dev Intersection. Next up is the Viva Engage Festival. Fill your head with all of those community-oriented at-work things that you need to know and learn about Viva Engage. This is put on by our partner Swoop Analytics on December 6th, 2023, and keep an eye out for a similar offering in May 2024, which is a festival for SharePoint. But for now, Viva Engage Festival, December 6th. Also peeking ahead into 2024, I've got two last events that I want to mention. The Teams Nation coming again in 2024. This is on February 21st, hosted by our MVPs Chris Horde, Chirag Patel, and team. Just look for it out in the Twittersville and the LinkedIn side of things, hashtag Teams Nation, and I'll have a link to an early tweet so that the second that information comes out, you will be aware of it. And last, recently announced is the inaugural Microsoft Fabric Community Conference. This will be held in Vegas, March 26th through the 28th, 2024. This is a chance to learn at depth about our powerful all-in-one analytics solution that addresses everything enterprises need, from data movement and data science to real-time analytics and business intelligence. Fabric. It will be a ton of information, and it's consolidated in a way that has never been done before because now they have their own conference. That is the Microsoft Fabric Community Conference, March 26th through the 28th, 2024. And with that, I also want to say, if you have an event that we haven't covered or we don't know about, please send it to us so that we can highlight it on a future Intrazone episode. Thank you to our guest, Andy Huneycutt, for being on the show and for sharing all things Copilot-y and flowing with Power Automate and his take on AI. We encourage you to check out our show page for links to all of what was discussed today and more. Just go to aka.ms/theintrazone. You can send us questions and feedback. We'll get them to all the right people. Just send us an email at theintrazone@microsoft.com or via Twitter @SharePoint, @Andy Huneycutt, @MCashman, and @CMcNulty2000. And please, we would love for you to share the Intrazone. Remember to rate, review, and tell all your friends about the show, and follow the show wherever you get your favorite tech podcasts. Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Mark Cashman. This has been The Intrazone, a show about the Microsoft 365 self-generating and self-automating intelligent intranet.